Somewhere in your nan's house there is probably still a building society passbook, held shut with a perished rubber band. A little book with neat ink stamps, every deposit written in by hand. It looks like nothing, but whoever filled it in knew things about money that today's pension companies would rather you never discovered. In the 1980s, ordinary British families turned a few pounds a week into real security, using tricks the financial industry has spent 40 years quietly burying. Number 4 on this list was so generous the government eventually had to slam the door on it. And number 1 is the single best deal a British worker was ever offered, and almost nobody under 50 will ever get it again. Hit subscribe. Let us count down all 25. Number 25, the biscuit tin float. Before apps rounded up your spare change, every kitchen had a Quality Street or Peak Friends tin doing the same job for free. Your mum kept a pound here, a 50 pence there, money that was deliberately awkward to reach. No card, no overdraft, no one-tap spending. To raid it, you had to physically lift the lid and feel the guilt. That friction was the entire point. Behavioral economists at the LSE now publish papers on mental accounting and charge banks a fortune to design it back into our finances. Your mum did it with a tin and a teaspoon of willpower. The tin never charged a management fee, never moved her money into a lifestyle fund, and was open 24 hours a day, decades before anyone promised that as a feature. Number 24, the co-op divvy. Long before cashback cards, there was the dividend. Every shopper had a divvy number recited at the till like a prayer, and twice a year the cooperative paid members a share of the profits, often a few shillings in the pound, on everything they had bought. Your gran knew her number before she knew her own phone number. The genius was that you got rewarded simply for being a part owner of the shop you used anyway. No points that expired, no tiers, no app harvesting your data to sell back to you. It was a loyalty scheme where the customer was the shareholder. Modern reward cards dangle a fraction of a penny per pound and call it generous. The old divvy was real ownership of a real business, paid in real money you could spend on coal. Number 23. Green Shield stamps. That sticky little book lived in the kitchen drawer, slowly fattening with stamps licked from the petrol station and the grocer's. Fill enough books, and the catalogue gave you a kettle, a clock, a whole canteen of cutlery, all without a penny of cash changing hands. Families treated saving stamps as a second currency, a way of squirreling away value from spending they were doing regardless. The discipline of sticking, saving, and waiting taught a generation that small amounts compound into something you can hold. Tesco eventually killed Green Shield with checkout discounts, and the whole system faded by the early 80s. But the habit it drilled, turning everyday spending into a slow, patient hoard, is exactly the habit pension firms now spend millions trying to teach back to people who have forgotten it. Number 22. The Christmas Savings Club. Every November, your mum handed a few pounds a week to a woman at the factory, the pub, or the corner shop, and by December, it came back as a hamper or a wad of notes for presents. It paid no interest at all, and that was never the point. It was a fortress against your own temptation. The money left the house before it could be spent on something else, locked away with people you saw every day and could not easily face if you backed out. That social pressure was the lock. Yes, some clubs collapsed and people lost the lot, which taught a hard lesson about counterparty risk that no leaflet ever could. But the principle, paying your future self first and making the money hard to touch, is the exact mechanism every workplace pension now relies on. Number 21. The Post Office Savings Bank Book. Backed by the Treasury itself, the humble post office book was the safest home for money in the country. You queued behind pensioners collecting their pension, slid your book across the counter, and watched a clerk stamp in your deposit in fountain pen. There was no risk of the institution going bust, because the institution was the British government. For a working family with no taste for the stock market, this was certainty you could touch. The interest was modest, but the capital was rock solid. Today, people pay platform fees for low-risk funds that still rise and fall every morning, and they have no idea what they actually own. Your grandparents owned a book, a stamp, and a guarantee from the Crown. Simplicity was not a weakness, it was the whole product. Number 20. The National Savings Ordinary Account. A cousin of the post office book, the ordinary account had one quietly brilliant feature the savings industry has never matched. The first portion of interest was completely tax-free. Working people could keep a sensible sum in a government-backed account, and the taxman did not touch the modest return. No allowances to track, no forms, no complexity. It rewarded ordinary thrift rather than clever accountancy. The amounts were never going to make anyone rich, but it was honest money for honest saving, with the state as your bank. Compare that to a modern pension wrapper, where the tax relief is real, but buried under charges, lifestyling, and small print most people never read. The ordinary account asked nothing of you but a deposit, and gave back something the system rarely does now, a guarantee you could understand in one sentence. Number 19. Premium bonds. Here is where things get interesting, because premium bonds break every rule. They pay no interest. Your stake just sits there. Yet every month Ernie, the famous random number machine, picks winners, and your bond could turn into a tax-free prize. To the city, this looks irrational. To a British family, it was perfect. Your capital was 100% safe, fully backed by the Treasury, and you got a flutter on top with nothing to lose. You could cash them in any time, no penalty, no notice. Pension companies would love to sell you something with no downside and a free monthly lottery, but they cannot, because there is no fat margin in it for them. That is the real reason premium bonds get a sniffy reception in financial circles. They are too fair. Your gran still checks her numbers, and good for her. Number 18. The Building Society Passbook. This is the big one people forget. In the 1980s, your building society was not a company. It was a mutual, owned by its savers and borrowers, with no shareholders demanding profit. The Halifax, the Nationwide, the Woolwich, the Abbey National. Every one of them existed only to serve the members. That meant better savings rates and fairer mortgages, because there was no third party skimming the cream. Your passbook was a share of the institution. Then came the 90s, demutualization and the windfall shares that tempted members to vote their own mutuals away. Most of those banks were then swallowed or blew up in 2008. We traded ownership for a one-off check and lost a system built for us. Today's pension giants answer to shareholders first. The old building society answered to the person holding the passbook. Number 17. The National Savings Investment Account. For families who wanted a touch more return than the ordinary book, but still no risk, the investment account was the quiet workhorse. A higher rate, government-backed, with a short notice period that gently discouraged you from raiding it on a whim. That notice period was a feature, not a bug. The same locking mechanism the Christmas Club used, dressed in Treasury clothing. People moved their slowly building nest egg here when it outgrew the biscuit tin. The beauty was that there were never any exit charges, never a falling unit price, never a letter explaining that markets had been volatile. You knew exactly what you had. Modern cash management products bury the same idea under apps and tiers and teaser rates that drop the moment you stop watching. The investment account just paid, year after dull, dependable year. Number 16. Save as you earn at work. Introduced in 1980, SAYE, or ShareSave, let employees put a fixed sum aside from their wages every month for 3 or 5 years to buy shares in their own company, at a price fixed at the start, often with a discount. If the shares rose, you bought low and pocketed the difference. If they fell, you simply took your savings back with a tax-free bonus, having risked nothing. Heads you win, tails you do not lose. Millions of ordinary workers built real capital this way, without ever needing to understand the stock market. It was investing with a safety net, stitched in by law. The discipline came straight out of your pay packet before you saw it. the single most reliable saving trick ever devised. Many modern pensions use the same payroll deduction, but few offer you that elegant, no-lose floor underneath. Number 15. The works pension contribution. Pattern break. Here is where the industry really does not want you looking. In the 1980s, joining the company pension was not a tick box on an app you ignored. It was a serious decision, and the employer often paid in a packet alongside you, sometimes pound for pound. That match was free money, an instant doubling of your stake before a penny of growth. Workers who joined young and stayed put built fortunes on it. The trick was not clever, it was simply turning up and not opting out. Today, auto-enrollment quietly puts you in a scheme, but the employer minimum is a thin sliver of what generous firms paid 40 years ago. The lesson survives untouched by time. The contribution your employer makes is the best return you will ever get, and most people leave half of it on the table. Number 14. The friendly society policy. Long before the big insurers dominated, working people clubbed together in friendly societies. The Foresters, the Oddfellows, the Hearts of Oak. You paid a few pence a week, and the society paid out when you were sick, when you buried a loved one, when life went wrong. They were owned by the members, run for the members, and tax-advantaged by law. In the 80s, many still offered tax-exempt savings plans that let ordinary families build a tidy sum sheltered from the taxman, with no minimum income required. They were the original mutual safety net, born of the idea that ordinary people protect each other better than any boardroom will. Most have faded or merged now, their gentle tax breaks shrunk to almost nothing. But the principle, pooled risk, owned by the people taking it, is exactly what a pension fund pretends to be and rarely is. Number 13. The endowment mortgage. Controversy incoming. In the 1980s, the salesman arrived with a glossy chart and a promise. Pay interest only on your mortgage and feed a separate endowment policy that would, he swore, clear the whole loan and leave a lump sum on top. Millions signed. For a while, with markets soaring, some did brilliantly. The dirty secret is what came next. The projections were rosy, the commissions enormous, and when stock markets cooled, hundreds of thousands found their endowments fell short of the mortgage they were meant to repay. It became one of the great mis-selling scandals in British history. The lesson is the sharpest on this list, and it is the opposite of nostalgia. When a man earns a fat commission for selling you a product whose return is only a projection, the projection is for him, not for you. That has not changed one bit. Number 12. The with profits policy. Here was the clever idea behind the endowment, the part that actually worked when run honestly. With profits smoothed your returns. In a good year, the insurer held some growth back. In a bad year, it topped you up from the reserves, so your money rose in a gentle, reassuring line instead of a heart attack zigzag. To a generation that hated volatility, this was gold. The catch, which families learned the hard way, was that you could not see inside the box. You had no idea what you truly owned, the charges were opaque, and the famous equitable life, which had promised guaranteed annuity rates it could not honor, nearly took the whole idea down with it in 2000. Modern funds gave us transparency instead, which sounds better, until you realize watching your pension fall in real time is its own kind of torture. Number 11. The man from the Pru. Every street had one. The prudential agent who knocked on the door each week collected a few pence for the life policy and marked it in a book. It feels quaint now, almost comic. But that doorstep ritual did something no app has ever managed. It made saving a relationship. A real person stood on your step and gently held you to account. Lapse rates were low because letting your premium slip meant facing a neighbor, not ignoring a notification. The policies themselves were modest, sometimes poor value, and the commissions were heavy, so this is no pure hero. But the behavioral engine, human contact enforcing a tiny, regular commitment, is precisely what the entire industry has spent 40 years trying and failing to rebuild with reminders and red dots. The Prue did it with a bicycle and a ledger. Number 10. The Trustee Savings Bank Loyalty. The TSB began as a savings bank, literally for working people, run for their benefit, with no greedy shareholders in sight. For generations, it was the safe, sober place to keep a wage. Then, in 1986, it floated on the stock market in one of the decade's great share giveaways, and the ownership question got murky overnight. Famously, nobody could quite say who owned it before. Savers who picked up shares in the flotation often did very nicely. But the deeper lesson is the one that repeats across this whole list. An institution built purely to serve savers will always, eventually, be tempted onto the market and remade to serve shareholders instead. When that happens, the customer quietly slides from owner to product. Spotting which side of that line your money sits on is the most valuable financial skill there is. Number 9. The BT privatization shares. November 1984. The government sold off British Telecom, and ordinary people, not just city men in pinstripes, were invited to buy shares for the first time in a generation. Millions did, in small, affordable lots, and watched them leap on the first day of trading. It turned bus drivers and dinner ladies into shareholders overnight and lit the fuse on the popular capitalism of the decade. The genius for the buyer was the deliberately low offer price, set to guarantee a pop and win hearts. The risk, of course, was real. A share can fall as easily as rise, and not every privatization was a winner. But for a brief window, the state handed ordinary savers a deck stacked gently in their favor, the opposite of how a fund manager handles you today. You will not be invited to that party again. Number 8. Tell Sid. 1986. British Gas went the same way, and this time the campaign was unforgettable. The whole country urged to tell Sid about the shares before the offer closed. Pattern break, because this is where popular capitalism peaked. People who had never owned a single share queued at the bank with application forms, and again the price was pitched to deliver an opening day jump. Families who held on for years often did very well on the dividends alone. But here is the part nobody put in the adverts. The campaigns were brilliant marketing precisely because the state wanted a stampede, and a stampede is rarely the time to think calmly. The savers who profited most were the ones who treated it not as a flutter, but as a long, boring hold. Boring, once again, was the secret. It always is. Number 7. Personal equity plans. Introduced in 1986, the PEP was a quiet revolution. A wrapper that let ordinary people hold shares and investments with the growth and the income free of tax, forever. No clever accounting, no offshore trickery, just a legal box where the taxman could not follow. For families willing to take some market risk, it was the single most efficient way to build long-term wealth the country had ever offered the little guy. The annual limits meant you fed it patiently, year after year, exactly the slow hoard discipline of the Green Shield book scaled up to real money. PEPs eventually became the ISA we know today, but the 80s version came with a purity the modern system has cluttered with rules. The principle endures, and it still beats most pensions for sheer flexibility. Tax-free, accessible, and entirely yours. Number 6. Index-linked gilts. First issued in 1981, these were British government bonds with a superpower. Both the interest and the capital rose in step with inflation. In an era when prices were galloping at double digits and savers were being quietly robbed by the falling pound, here was a state-backed promise that your money would keep its real value, guaranteed, in writing, by the Treasury. The wealthy and the canny snapped them up. They are the purest answer ever invented to the question that haunts every saver. What if my money buys less next year? Modern pension funds hold them by the billion and charge you handsomely for the privilege of accessing them through a wrapper. In the 80s, a determined individual could simply own the thing itself. Inflation protection, fully guaranteed, is the rarest commodity in finance, and the 80s had it on tap. Number 5. Index-linked national savings certificates. Now we reach the legends. Once nicknamed granny bonds because they were first reserved for pensioners, these certificates were thrown open to all in the early 80s, and they were almost too good to be true. They paid a return that tracked inflation and added a little on top. And, the killer feature, every penny was completely free of tax. No income tax, no capital gains tax, nothing. Government-backed, inflation-proof, and untouchable by the revenue. There has never been a safer way to grow real money in Britain. They were so good that issues sold out, and the Treasury repeatedly had to withdraw them, because the state was effectively losing the argument with its own savers. Today they are gone, off sale, and no pension product on earth can replicate that combination of total safety, full inflation protection, and zero tax. The grannies, it turned out, were the smartest investors in the country. Number 4. The right to buy. The Housing Act of 1980 did something no savings account ever could. It let council tenants buy their own homes at a colossal discount, sometimes a third off, sometimes half, rising with the years you had lived there. Families who had paid rent for decades suddenly owned bricks and mortar, often for a fraction of the market price, and watched that asset grow into the largest single pot of wealth they would ever hold. It was so generous, the government eventually had to rein the discounts back, and the policy still sparks fierce argument about what it did to social housing. But as a wealth-building secret for the individual family, nothing on this list comes close. A home you own outright is the foundation every pension is trying, and usually failing, to match. For millions, the right to buy was the moment they stopped renting their future and finally owned it. Number 3. The mortgage you actually finished paying. A quiet one, but the truest. In the 1980s, the goal was sacred and simple. Clear the mortgage before you stopped working. Families overpaid when they could, threw bonuses at the loan, and treated debt as something to be killed, not managed forever. Reaching retirement with no mortgage meant your pension only had to cover living, not a lender. That single fact, owning your roof free and clear, slashes the income you need in old age more than any clever fund ever will. The modern world sells you good debt, interest-only deals, and the idea that a mortgage is a lifelong companion. Your grandparents would have laughed. They burned the mortgage papers and meant it. A paid-off home is the most powerful pension top-up in existence, and it pays the day you make the final payment. Number 2. The annuity bought when rates were high. Here is the cruel twist of timing. When your grandparents reached retirement and turned their pension pot into an income, they were often buying an annuity in an era of high interest rates, which meant the same pot bought a far bigger guaranteed income for life than it would today. Some of those guaranteed annuity rates, written into policies in the 70s and 80s, were so generous that companies like Equitable Life later collapsed trying to honor them. A guaranteed income that never falls, paid until your last day, with no market to watch and no fund to outlive, is the holy grail. And a generation locked it in when the locking was cheap. Modern retirees, facing far lower rates, get a thinner promise for the same money. The secret here was not skill, it was being born at the right time and grabbing the guarantee while it lasted. Number 1. The final salary pension. And in first place, the single greatest financial deal ever offered to a British worker, the defined benefit, final salary pension. The promise was breathtaking. A guaranteed income for the rest of your life, based on your final pay and your years of service, rising with inflation, paid by your employer no matter what the stock market did. The risk sat entirely with the company, not with you. You could not outlive it, could not lose it to a crash, did not need to understand a single fund or chart. You simply worked and retired and were paid until you died. It was so expensive to provide that businesses have spent the last 30 years closing these schemes as fast as the law allows, replacing them with pots that hand all the risk back to you. Anyone who still holds a final salary pension is sitting on the richest financial secret of the entire era. Guard it. They will never make another one. There it is, 25 secrets, and the same thread runs through every single one. The products that served you owned by you, the discipline of paying your future self first, and the quiet power of a guarantee you could understand in one sentence. Your grandparents knew. Now you do too. If one of these surprised you, tell me which in the comments and pass it on to someone who is still being told the only safe thing to do is hand it all to a pension company.